What I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes is the ethics. We have to have ethics in part of the CLE, and you do have about 2.5 hours of ethics. The term ethics and morality are often used interchangeably, and those are used by ethicists and philosophers. And it's not moving. Could you move next slide, please? So the term ethics and morality are often used interchangeably by ethicists and philosophers who consider the terms to be the same as moral philosophy. But academic, legal, medical, and religious professionals do make a distinction between ethics and morality. Morality is something that is personal, is normative. Ethics is the standard of good and bad that is distinguished by a certain community or a social setting. Next slide, please. For example, a local community, next slide, please. For example, a local community may think abortion is immoral, and some people may personally agree with that. However, if the local community has no strong feelings about abortion, and an individual considers abortion immoral on a personal level, in this situation, morality will contradict the ethics of one's community. Morality is a religious connotation to many people because moral theology is prominent in the church. On the other hand, the terms ethics is used in conjunction with business, with medicine, with law and other professions. Well, in 1215, Pope Innocent II called into session the Fourth Lateran Council in England. The council was made of around 400 bishops. Now, mind you, we're talking 1215 AD. The council was made up of around 400 bishops, 800 priests of high level, and a large contingent of representatives on behalf of the monarchs of Christendom. Well, the Fourth Council is lauded as one of the greatest church councils. The Council Canon number 68 installed racial law, and it ordered Jews and Muslims to mark themselves off by a difference in dress, which became a badge of shame. 75 years later, the English Parliament passed a law that drove Jews completely out of England. Well, the Edict of Expulsion was a royal decree that was issued by King Edward I of England on July 18, 1290, expelling all Jews from the Kingdom of England. And what about Muslims? Muslims who were in England were turned into non-humans. The theologian Bernard Clairvaux announced that the killing of Muslims was not actually homicide. It was malicide, which is the extermination of incarnated evil, not the killing of a person. Next slide, please. What does that mean? Well, in 1837, an English court of common pleas established in the case of Vaughan, I think you need the next slide, please. That the case of Vaughan, yeah, thank you. So in 1837, as I said, we have the Vaughan case, which established that the reasonable person standard is objective. That's where we got the reasonable standard as being objective from England. In the Vaughan case, a farmer piled a haystack near the neighbor's cabin. Subsequently, the haystack caught fire and burned his neighbor's cabin down. Well, the neighbor sued. And the farmer argued that he personally should not be liable because he genuinely did not consider that the haystack may cause his neighbor's cabin to burn down. Well, the jury found that the farmer's actions were objectively unreasonable. So the court held that the farmer should be held to the standard of an objective, reasonable person and found him liable. So at common law, the reasonable person standard is objective and not subjective, although it is a fictional legal standard for lawful behavior. Well, in next slide, June of 2020, the Dobbs case has already been mentioned. It overturned the 50-year precedent of Roe versus Wade. And as you know, the majority of the honorable justices of the US Supreme Court knew or should have known that the Dobbs decision might, like hay, catch fire, which could then burn many American citizens. The minority decision vehemently disagreed with the majority decision, and some of the justices have actually been talking about it publicly, the pros and the cons. Mind you, this is not a political, we are strictly educational, and we do not deal with politics. And I'm presenting you the history because we base our decisions to a large degree on precedent, as the Honorable Justice Gurich mentioned, and we also learn from the past. So the questions that you need to decide from an educational standpoint: was the majority decision ethical, in your opinion? Was it moral? Was it legal? Was it objectively reasonable? Why are we in this situation? Next slide, please. You know, humans settled in North America 37,000 years ago. And the native Indians lived in this country for untold generations. They celebrated the bounty given to them by the Great Spirit. That was their religion, basically. Abortion was legal and ethical, although some native Indians personally or morally disapproved. Next slide, please. Well, about 500 years ago, in 1507 AD, the name America was proposed, and it was named on a map after Amerigo Vespucci. an Italian explorer who set forth the concept that the lands that Christopher Columbus sailed to in 1492 were part of a separate continent. Well, in 1500, next slide please, in 1500, there were approximately 7 million native Indians. 7 million. Over the next 250 years, as you can see on this slide, the population of the native Indians in North America dropped to about 1 million. Some died of contagious diseases that were carried from the Europeans, and they had some devastating illnesses, including the plague. However, other Indians were killed, as most of you would know about the history. And in 1750, so that's 250 years later, just the time when America was yet to be created, the non-Native Americans had risen to were about 1 million at that time, and the non-native ones were also 1 million. They were about equal. This is important. Please keep that in mind. The Indians fell from 7 million to 1 million, and now we had from virtually very few non-Indians in 1500 to about 1 million just before America was created. Next slide, please. On May 20, by 1750, the number of non-Native Americans had gradually started to rise. So on May 28, 1830, US Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. That began the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans from Florida, from Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Kentucky. And that's what became known as the Trail of Tears. The Native Americans were displaced from their lands that the government and the wealthy European sector had plans for. The map shows the route of the 5 southeastern tribes that were forced to leave their homeland in the southeast and live in Indian territory in what is now Oklahoma. And the question I ask you again, that I hope you will ask or respond to, was the treatment of Native Indians in America ethical? Was it moral? Was it reasonable? Next slide, please. In 2022, according to the US Census, the total population of the Native Americans is 6.79 million Indians. Over a period of 500 years, now they are getting close to what they were in 1500. And I don't need to tell you about the population of the United States, which is a little over 334 million. So the non-Native Americans increased from 1 million to 334 million, while the Indians were just trying to get back to what they were in 1500. Next slide, please. In an extraordinary sharp contrast, as I said, we have the current population of 335 million, and that's about 4% of the world population. The US is now the #1 superpower. Even though the world's population is about 8 billion people, and the top 2 countries by population are, as most of you know, China, 1.45 billion, and India, 1.4 billion. Next slide, please. What is more interesting than the population are the religions. And again, I want you to know that I am not, and I will not even attempt to get close to politics, but I do want you to know about the religions in the world and in our country. According to the Pew Research Center, a respectable center, the demographic analysis in 2020, 68% of the global population are non-Christians. Islam, the Muslims are about 24%, Hinduism 13.6%, and the non-religious represent a good number of about 12%. Buddhism is 6.8%. Christianity is approximately 32% of the world population, 1 out of 3. In 2022, the Pew Research Center noted that Islam will be the largest religion in the world by 2030. Next slide, please. Religion in the United States are different from the rest of the world. In 2010, the US Christians comprised 78% of the population. By 2050, however, it is expected that the Christian religion will be down or drop to 66%. And in 2010, 16% were unaffiliated, in other words, either atheists or agnostics. And by 2050, that will rise to 25%. In fact, in terms of rapidity of rise of, quote, religion, unquote, the atheist and the agnostics is the one rising fastest. Second, the Islam and Christians would be dropping according to the Pew Research. Now, people from different European countries, as you know, came to America to escape religious oppression. And they had their beliefs were being forced upon them when they were in England and in other parts of Europe. And they were being tortured and killed. They had to do whatever the ruling religion was. And in England, there was the Roman Catholic Church and then the Church of England. Well, there was a lot of civil unrest, and that's why we have a number of people to resolve that civil unrest. The America's, next slide, please. America's forefathers established the separation of church and state and guaranteed that freedom to practice one's faith without fear or persecution. That guarantee was enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution in 1791. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We can move to the next slide, please. And I've gone over that. Thank you. Next slide, please. Well, the Honorable Benjamin Nathan Cardozo who served on the Supreme Court in 1932 until his death in 1938. But before that, he was judge, and in 1914, then Judge Cardozo stated in the landmark case of Schlender versus Society of New York Hospital that every human being of adult years and sound mind has a right to determine what shall be done with his, and I added, her own body. Next slide, please. Religions do not agree on abortion. Christians recognize that the people's right to protect themselves and their lives from dangerous or complicated pregnancies, that is important. About 56% of Catholics, and I confess I am a Catholic, 56 support legal abortion, but 47% of evangelicals do not oppose abortion. About 55% of Muslims believe in permitting abortion to protect the mother's life. And in Judaism, the foundational religion texts state that life begins at birth. In general, 83% of American Jews consider abortion a basic human right and should be legal. Jews believe that life begins at birth and not at conception. Next slide, please. On July 14, after the Dobbs case was passed, Rabbi Barry Silver of Boca Raton, Florida, challenged the Florida state law banning abortions after 15 weeks. He argued that the law violates the state constitutional's right to privacy and freedom of religion. The Unitarian Reverend Harris Reardon and the Buddhist minister Maya Maley, also of Florida, also filed a lawsuit in state court echoing arguments from Rabbi Barry Silver. Rabbi, in August, as most of you more likely know about this, in August 2022, in Kansas, 58.9% voted to keep abortion as a state constitutional right. And I am ashamed of the Catholic Church that provided $1 million to support those that were opposing that. There are a few things I disagree with, and this is one of them, but that's not political. I'm giving as a moral issue. I don't think that the church should be involved in elections. Sorry about that. I'll stick to my religious presentation. Rabbi Harris, who has been the spiritual leader of Temple Deny Israel in Oklahoma City. She's been here for about 10 years. She is the 5th rabbi to serve the congregation since the founding in 1903. On July 24, 2022, in a guest column in the Oklahoman, Rabbi Harris wrote, and I quote, "Make no mistake about it, pregnancy is not a condition wherein a separate being just happens to be independently living inside a womb. And it does not happen spontaneously or immaculately. Judaism, she said, does not condone all abortions in all circumstances. It also does not regard a fetus as a person with rights equal to the one who is carrying it. And then she went on to say, mislabeling abortion as murder, making a woman's life not even equal to, but less than that of a fetus, and disregarding a woman's ability to speak up for herself and for her own needs. These all violate the religious and moral convictions of our tradition.